Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents How to Read Literature Like a Professor for Kids by Thomas E. Foster, narrated by David Vries. Introduction. How'd he do that? Mr. Lindner? That wimp? Right, Mr. Lindner, the wimp. So what did you think the devil would look like? If he were red, with a tail, horns, and cloven hooves, any fool would know to turn down his offer. The class and I are discussing Lorraine Hansberry's play A Raisin in the Sun, 1959. The confused questions arise when I suggest that Mr. Lindner is the devil. The Youngers, an African-American family in Chicago, have made a down payment on a house in an all-white neighborhood. Mr. Lindner, a meek little man, has come to visit with a check in hand. He, along with all the neighbors, wants the family to take the check and move right back out again. At first, Walter Lee Younger confidently turns down the offer. He believes that the family's money, a life insurance payment they received after the death of Walter's father, is secure. But shortly after sending Mr. Lindner away, he discovers that 2/3 of that money has been stolen. All of a sudden, Mr. Lindner's insulting offer comes to look like the family's salvation. Bargains with the devil go a long way back. Most take the form of the Faust legend. In this old story, the devil offers Faust a life of pleasure, riches, and power in return for his soul. Faust accepts happily, enjoys his good times, and then repents too late as the devil drags his dying soul to hell. It's a story that's retold often. Each time, the hero is offered something he desperately wants. Power or knowledge or a fastball that will beat the Yankees, and all he has to give up is his soul. In Hansberry's version, when Mr. Lindner makes his offer, he doesn't mention Walter Lee's soul. He doesn't even know that he is demanding it. He is, though. Walter Lee can be rescued from his family's crisis. All he has to do is to admit that he's not equal to his new white neighbors, that his pride and self-respect, his identity, can be bought. If that's not selling your soul, what is? But Walter Lee resists the devil's temptation. He looks at himself and at the true cost of the bargain and recovers in time to reject the devil's, Mr. Lindner's, offer. Walter Lee grows into a hero as he wrestles with his own demons, as well as with the one who comes to visit with a check, and he comes through without falling. His soul is still his own. Something always happens in this conversation between professor and students. Each of us gets a look on our faces. My look says, "What, you don't get it?" Theirs says, "We don't get it, and we think you're making it up." Basically, we've all read the same story, but we haven't used the same tools to analyze it. It might seem as if the teacher is inventing a way to interpret the story out of thin air. Actually, the teacher just has some more experience, and the teacher has gathered over the years a kind of grammar of literature. That's a certain set of patterns, codes, and rules that we can learn to use when we're reading a piece of writing. Stories and novels have a very large set of conventions, or rules, or things that you can learn to expect. Types of characters, plot rhythms, chapter structures, points of view. Poems have a great many conventions of their own, plays too, and there are certain conventions that show up in all three. Spring usually means the same thing, whether it's mentioned in a poem or a play or a novel. So does snow, so does darkness. So does sleep. Whenever spring is mentioned, we all start to think of the same ideas. Youth, promise, young lambs, children skipping, on and on. And if we keep thinking, we might get to other concepts like new birth, new life, renewal. Okay, let's say you're right, and there is a set of conventions, like a key to reading literature. How do I get so I can recognize these? Same way you get to Carnegie Hall. Practice. When readers first read a piece of fiction, they focus on the story and the characters. Who are these people? What are they doing? And what wonderful or terrible things are happening to them? They will respond emotionally with joy or horror, laughter or tears, anxiety or delight. This is what every author hopes for. But when an English teacher reads, though he will respond emotionally as well, a lot of his attention will also be fixed on other things. It will be asking other questions. Where did that joy or grief or anxiety come from? Does this character seem like any others I've read about? Where have I seen this situation before? If you learn to ask these questions, you'll read and understand literature in a new light, and it will become even more rewarding and fun. Chapter 1. Every trip is a quest, except when it's not. Okay, so here's the deal. Let's say you're reading a book about an average 16-year-old kid in the summer of 1968. The kid, let's call him Kip Smith, who hopes his acne clears up before he gets drafted, is on his way to the A&P to get a loaf of bread. His bike is a one-speed with a coaster brake, and therefore very embarrassing to ride, and riding it to run an errand for his mother makes it worse. Along the way, he has a couple of disturbing experiences, including an unpleasant encounter with a German Shepherd. And it's all topped off in the supermarket parking lot when he sees the girl of his dreams, Karen, laughing and fooling around in Tony Vauxhall's brand-new car, a Barracuda. Now, Kip hates Tony already because he's got a name like Vauxhall and not Smith, and because the Barracuda is bright green and goes approximately the speed of light, and also because Tony has never had to work a day in his life. Karen, who is laughing and having a great time, turns and sees Kip, who asked her out not so long ago. And she keeps laughing. Kip goes on into the store to buy a loaf of Wonder Bread that his mother told him to pick up. As he reaches for the bread, he decides right then and there to lie about his age to the Marine recruiter, even though it means going to Vietnam, because nothing will ever happen to him if he stays in this one-horse town where the only thing that matters is how much money your father has. What just happened here? If you were an English teacher, and not even a particularly weird English teacher, you'd know that you'd just watched a knight have an encounter with his enemy. In other words, a quest just happened. But it just looked like a trip to the store for some white bread. True, but think about it. What is a quest made of? A knight, a dangerous road, a holy grail, at least one dragon, one evil knight, one princess. Sounds about right. That's a list I can live with. We've got a knight named Kip, a dangerous road, nasty German Shepherd, a holy grail, a loaf of Wonder Bread, at least one dragon. Trust me, a 68 Barracuda could definitely breathe fire. One evil knight, Tony, one princess, Karen. Seems like a bit of a stretch. At first, sure, but let's think about what a quest is made of. It needs 5 things. 1, a quester. 2, a place to go. 3, a stated reason to go there. 4, challenges and trials along the way. 5, a real reason to go there. Item 1 is easy. A quester is just a person who goes on a quest, whether or not he knows it's a quest. In fact, he usually doesn't know. Items 2 and 3 go together. Someone tells our main character, our hero, to go somewhere and do something. Go in search of the Holy Grail. Go to the store for some bread. Go to Mount Doom and throw in a ring. Go there, do that. Now remember that I said the stated reason for the quest. That's because of item 5. The real reason for the quest is never the same as the stated reason. In fact, more often than not, the quester fails at the stated task. Frodo makes it all the way to Mount Doom, but does he throw the ring in the fire? No, he does not. Really, go read it again if you don't believe me. So why do heroes go on these quests? And why do we care? They go because of the stated task, believing that it is their real mission. We know, however, that their quest is educational. They don't know enough about the only subject that really matters, themselves. The real reason for a quest is always self-knowledge. Frodo may have saved the world from Sauron, but that really just turned out to be a bit of luck. What his quest actually brings him is a new understanding of the value of mercy and who needs it. Gollum, Frodo himself, and probably everybody in Middle-earth. Or here's another example. You know the book, I'm sure. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, 1957. Wait a minute. The Grinch is on a quest? Sure. Here's the setup. 1. Our quester, a grumpy, cave-dwelling creature who's had it up to here with the noise, celebration, and general happiness of Christmas. 2. A place to go, from his mountaintop cave to the village of Whoville, far below. 3. A stated reason to go there, to steal every Christmas present, tree, and bit of decoration he can lay his hands on. 4. Challenges and trials, a risky sleigh trip down the mountain, considerable effort packing up the Christmas presents and trimmings, an encounter with a 2-year-old girl who puts all the Grinch's efforts in peril simply by asking a question, and a painfully difficult trip back up the mountain with an overloaded sleigh. 5. The real reason to go, to learn what Christmas actually means, to have his shriveled heart expand back to its proper size, or even bigger, and to find genuine happiness. Once you get the hang of it, you can see how the Grinch Stole Christmas follows the conventions of a quest tale. So does The Lord of the Rings, Huckleberry Finn, Star Wars, Holes, and most other stories of someone going somewhere and doing something, especially if the going and the doing weren't the protagonist's idea in the first place. A word of warning. If I sometimes speak here and in the chapters to come as if a certain statement is always true, I apologize. Always and never are not words that have much meaning when it comes to literature. For one thing, as soon as something seems to always be true, some wise guy will come along and write something to prove that it's not. Let's think about journeys. Sometimes the quest fails or is not taken up by the protagonist. And is every trip really a quest? It depends. Some days I just drive to work. No adventures, no growth. I'm sure that the same is true in writing. Sometimes plot requires that a writer get a character from home to work and back again, but still, when a character hits the road, we should start to pay attention, just to see if, something's going on there. Once you figure out quests, the rest is easy. Chapter 2. Nice to eat with you. Acts of Communion. Sometimes a meal is just a meal. Characters in books can get hungry just like people outside of books. More often, though, it's not. In books, whenever people eat or drink together, it's communion. Communion has for many readers one and only one meaning. While that meaning is very important, it is not the only one. Nor does Christianity have a lock on the practice. Nearly every religion has some kind of ritual where the faithful come together to share nourishment. But not all communions are holy. In books, there are quite a few kinds of communion. Here's the thing to remember about communions of all kinds. In the real world, breaking bread together is an act of sharing and peace, since if you're breaking bread, you're generally not breaking heads. You usually invite your friends to dinner, not your enemies. In fact, we're quite particular about who we eat with. Generally, eating with someone is a way of saying, I'm with you, I like you, we form a community together. And that is a kind of communion. So it is in literature. And in literature, there is another reason. Writing a meal scene is so difficult, and basically so dull. What can you say about fried chicken that hasn't already been said? That there really needs to be some very important reason to include one in the story. And that reason has to do with how the characters are getting along, or not getting along. How about the main character, who doesn't even have a name, of Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham, 1960? He doesn't want to eat green eggs and ham, not even to try them. And he doesn't want to listen to the little creature named Sam coaxing and begging and nagging him to take just one bite. In fact, he wants Sam to go away. "You let me be," he orders Sam. But when he finally does give in and try, he likes green eggs and ham. And he even likes Sam. He eats and he gains a friend. Communion at its simplest. Sometimes just meaning or planning to share some food is all that the story needs. You don't actually have to see the characters taking a single bite. Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, 1964, is all about eating, even though it starts out as one of the hungriest books out there. Charlie and his family live on bread, potatoes, and cabbage, and not enough of any of it. They are slowly starving. There is love in this downtrodden family, though, and the person poor little Charlie loves the most is his Grandpa Joe. Grandpa Joe gives Charlie all the money he has in the world, a dime. Charlie uses the dime to buy, what else? A chocolate bar. And Charlie and Grandpa Joe share the experience of hesitantly, almost fearfully, peeling off the wrapper to see if, underneath, they will find the golden ticket that will let them into Willy Wonka's fabulous chocolate factory. They don't find it, they find only a chocolate bar. And they both burst out laughing. They don't have to take a bite of the candy for readers to see what these two characters share. They share the sense of fun, of excitement, and of possibility that is a part of childhood. They share laughter. They share hope. Their communion over the bar of Willy Wonka's chocolate brings them closer than ever, and the old man and the little boy spend the rest of the book at each other's side. What about when characters don't eat together? What if a meal turns ugly or doesn't happen at all? There's a different outcome, but the same logic. If a tasty meal or snack or a delicious bar of chocolate suggests that good things will happen between the people who share it, then a meal that doesn't work out is a bad sign. It happens all the time on television shows. Two people are at dinner and a third comes up, and one or both of the first two refuse to eat. They place their napkins on their plates or say something about having lost their appetites and walk away. Immediately we know what they think about the intruder. Consider another book about chocolate, Robert Cormier's The Chocolate War, 1974. Well, the title says the book is about chocolate. Actually, the book is about bullying and corruption and power. About what it takes and what it costs to stand up to people with power. Jerry Renault defies the students who control his school by refusing to sell chocolates for a fundraiser, and he is destroyed for that choice. No one supports him. He's on his own. Nobody eats either. In an entire book about chocolate, nobody tastes one mouthful. There is no eating, there is no communion, and there is no help for Jerry. If anybody had ever cracked open a box of those fundraiser chocolates and taken a bite, the poor kid might have had a chance. Chapter 3. Nice to Eat You. Acts of Vampires. What a difference one little word makes. If you take the with out of nice to eat with you, it begins to mean something quite different. Less wholesome, more creepy. It just goes to show that not all eating that happens in literature is friendly. Not only that, it doesn't even always look like eating. Beyond here, there be monsters. Vampires in literature, you say? Big deal. I've read Twilight, Dracula, Anne Rice. Good for you. Everyone deserves a good scare, or a good swoon. But actual vampires are only the beginning. Not only that, they're not even necessarily the most alarming. After all, you can at least recognize a vampire who has fangs. Let's start with Dracula himself. You know how in all those Dracula movies, or almost all, the Count has this weird attractiveness to him? Sometimes he's downright sexy. Always he's dangerous, mysterious, and he tends to focus on beautiful unmarried women. And when he gets them, he grows younger, more alive, if we can say this of the undead. Meanwhile, his victims become like him and begin to seek out their own victims. Now let's think about this for a moment. A nasty old man, attractive but evil, violates young women, leaves his mark on them, steals their innocence, and leaves them helpless followers in his sin. I think we'd be reasonable to conclude that the whole Count Dracula story is up to something more than merely scaring us out of our wits. In fact, we might conclude that it has something to do with sex. But what about vampires who never bite? You're right. Famously, Edward does not bite Bella. But the vampire hero of Stephenie Meyer's Twilight, 2005, is mysteriously and powerfully attractive, isn't he? Just like Dracula. And he wants to bite Bella, doesn't he? Just like Dracula. Edward may be different in his self-control, but not in his desire. He wants exactly what Dracula wants, the blood of an innocent young woman. A young woman whose bedroom he creeps into. A young woman he watches while she sleeps. So vampirism isn't about vampires? Oh, it is, but it's also about other things. Selfishness, exploitation, a refusal to accept that other people have the right to exist, just for starters. We'll come back to this list a little later on. This rule also applies to other scary favorites, such as ghosts or doppelgangers, ghost doubles or evil twins. Ghosts are always about something besides themselves. Think of the ghost of Hamlet's father, when he takes to appearing on the castle ramparts at midnight. He's not there simply to haunt his son. He's there to point out something seriously wrong in Denmark's royal household. What's wrong? Oh, just that the king's brother first murdered the king and then married his widow. Or consider Marley's ghost in A Christmas Carol, 1843, who is really a walking, clanking, moaning lesson in ethics for Scrooge. Or take Dr. Jekyll's other half. In The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1886, Robert Louis Stevenson uses the hideous Mr. Hyde to show readers that even a respectable man has a dark side. Writers use ghosts, vampires, werewolves, and all manner of scary things to symbolize certain things about our everyday existence. Ghosts and vampires are never only about ghosts and vampires. Here's where it gets a little tricky, though. The ghosts and vampires don't always have to appear in visible form. Sometimes the really scary bloodsuckers are entirely human. Henry James has a famous story, Daisy Miller, 1878, in which there are no ghosts, there is no demonic possession. There's nothing more mysterious than a midnight jaunt to the Colosseum in Rome. Daisy is a young American woman who does as she pleases. She upsets the social customs of the rich Europeans she meets. Eventually, Daisy dies, apparently because she caught malaria on her trip to the Colosseum. But you know what actually kills her? Vampires. No, really, vampires. I know I told you there weren't any supernatural forces at work here, but you don't need fangs and a cape to be a vampire. Daisy wants the attention of a man named Winterbourne. Winterbourne and his aunt and their circle of friends watch Daisy and disapprove of her. But because of a hunger to disapprove of something, they never cut her loose entirely. Instead, they play with her, yearning to become one of them. At last, Winterbourne spots Daisy with a male friend at the Colosseum at night and pretends not to see her. Daisy says, "He cuts me dead." That should be clear enough for anybody. The important points of the vampire story are all here. There's an older man who represents corrupt, worn-out values. There's a fresh, innocent young woman. The woman loses her youth, energy, and virtue. The older man continues to live. The young woman dies. There are books, of course, where the ghost or vampire is just a cheap thrill without any particular meaning. But such works tend not to have much staying power in readers' minds. We're haunted only while we're reading. In the books that continue to haunt us, however, the figure of the vampire, the cannibal, the spook shows up again and again, whenever someone grows in strength by weakening someone else. That's what the vampire figure really comes down to, using other people to get what we want, denying someone else's right to live, placing our own desires, particularly our ugly ones, above the needs of someone else. My guess is that as long as people act in selfish ways, the vampire will be with us. Chapter 4. If it's square, it's a sonnet. Every now and then, I'll ask my students what kind of poem we're talking about, what form the poem uses. The first time, the answer will be sonnet. The next time, sonnet. Care to guess about the third? Very good. Basically, I figure the sonnet is the only poetic form most readers will ever need to know. It's very common, has been written in every time period since the English Renaissance, and is still popular today. After I tell the students the first time that the poem is a sonnet, someone asks me how I knew so fast. I tell them two things. First, that I read the poem before class, useful for someone in my position, or theirs, come to think of it. And second, that I counted the lines when I noticed the shape of the poem. It's square. The miracle of the sonnet, you see, is that it is 14 lines long, and most lines have 10 syllables. And 10 syllables of English are about as long as 14 lines are high. Square. Okay, great. Who cares? I agree, up to a point. I think people who read poems should always read the poem first, without even thinking about its form or its style. They should not begin by counting lines or looking at line endings to find the rhyme scheme. Just enjoy the experience. After you've had that first experience, though, one of the extra pleasures you can get is seeing how the poet worked that magic on you. There are many ways a poem can charm the reader. Choice of images, music of the language, idea content, wordplay, and form. You might think that a poem of a mere 14 lines is only capable of doing one thing, but you'd be wrong. A sonnet, in fact, has 2 units of meaning, and a shift takes place between the first and the second. These 2 units are closely related to the 2 parts of the sonnet, and it's the sonnet's form that creates those 2 parts. Most sonnets have one group of 8 lines and one of 6. You can have a Petrarchan sonnet, which has an octave, 8 lines, and a sestet, a group of 6, or a Shakespearean sonnet, which has 3 groups of 4 lines, 3 quatrains, and a couplet, 2 lines. But even there, the first 2 quatrains join up to make a group of 8 lines, and the last quatrain joins up with the couplet to make a group of 6. However it works, the basic pattern is 8 and 6. Let's look at an example. Christina Rossetti was a British poet of the late 1800s. This is her poem, An Echo from Willow Wood, about 1870. 2 gazed into a pool, he gazed and she, not hand in hand, yet heart in heart, I think, pale and reluctant on the water's brink, as on the brink of parting, which must be. Each eyed the other's aspect, she and he. Each felt one hungering heart leap up and sink. Each tasted bitterness, which both must drink, there on the brink of life's dividing sea. Lilies upon the surface, deep below, 2 wistful faces craving each for each, resolute and reluctant without speech. A sudden ripple made the faces flow, one moment joined to vanish out of reach. So those hearts joined, and were parted so. It's a terrific little poem in its own right, and a good poem for our purposes. For one thing, it has neither a thee nor a thou in sight, so we get rid of some of the confusion that older poetry slings at modern readers. Anyway, I like Christina Rossetti, and I think that more people should be able to fall in love with her. At first glance, the poem doesn't really look square. True, but it's close. So the first question is, how many sentences? Not lines, of which there are 14, but sentences. The answer is 3. Can you guess where one period falls? Right, end of line 8. The first 8 lines, the octave, carry one idea. In this case, it's 2 sentences of 4 lines each, which we call quatrains. This is pretty common. The last 6 lines, the sestet.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?